from Gaza, the second this afternoon being fired from Yemen, and the third this evening fired from Lebanon. A clear indication that both Hamas, the Houthis in Yemen and Hezbollah the Houthis in Yemen and Hezbollah in Lebanon have all still got the capability to fire into Tel Aviv and into Israel. Keep an eye on the situation, obviously, throughout the Middle East, but for now, let's go back to Gillian.
Anna, thank you. Labour isn't working was the famous Conservative slogan from an election past. Since their victory, it's been the team around Sir Keir Starmer that appeared not to be firing on all cylinders. And yesterday we saw the result with the sacking of his Chief of Staff, Sue Gray. Today we heard the concerns of some close to the party that Miss Gray's replacement may not represent all views in the Labour movement. As our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, reports.
Who does the Prime Minister actually listen to? Noisy protesters or unions, MPs or those that write campaign cheques. Every day, so many people and groups want the attention of the Prime Minister. But it's the top team in Number 10 who decide which messages get heard by Keir Starmer. And from today, his Downing Street is under new management.
Well, look, what I want to make sure is that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are listening. I mean, they themselves need to have their ear to the ground. They need to know exactly what's going on.
Do you think the new team will help that?
Well, I hope they do.
The vacancy created after the Prime Minister fired Sue Gray as Chief of Staff. Ministers today giving a brief farewell, but no desire to dwell.
I thank Sue Gray for all that she did as a superb public servant. This is a government pledged to serve. There is much to do. It's a young government, and we get on with the work ahead of us.
Now leading that work for the Prime Minister is this man, Morgan McSweeney, the election supremo who spent years in opposition trying to get Labour out of the grip of Jeremy Corbyn. Left-wing MPs worry he's still fighting the battles of the past and won't listen as much to arguments from their part of the Labour Party.
Morgan comes from a particular faction within the Labour Party. I think what you need as a Chief of Staff is someone who can straddle all the different elements of the party and be a true representative of broad church if it's going to be effective. To be frank, I don't think Morgan is that person.
But it's not just left-wing MPs who worry about a political imbalance in this government.
In a little over 3 weeks, the teams in the buildings behind me must deliver the event that could determine whether Keir Starmer's premiership is a success or a failure. That's the budget and the spending review. And I can tell you now, there is deep anxiety all across Whitehall. Fears the Treasury are asking for too much, that manifesto promises may not be able to be afforded, and that the scale of the bad news is just too much. And many cabinet ministers want the people in Number 10 behind me to intervene. A big ask for such a new team.
This is turning out to be the most fraught period in this new government's short lifespan. Can the new team in here calm things down fast? Sam Coates, Sky News, Westminster.
In other news, a Teesside GP has admitted plotting to kill his mother's partner by poisoning him with a fake COVID booster jab. Newcastle Crown Court heard that Thomas Kwan disguised himself as a community nurse, as seen on the left, to inject suspected pesticide into the 72-year-old's arm in January, causing severe injuries. Prosecutors say Kwan wanted to inherit all of his mother's estate. The 53-year-old initially denied attempted murder, but changed his plea after hearing the case against him in court. Another hurricane churning towards Florida has strengthened to become Category 5, the most dangerous. Hurricane Milton is forecast to make landfall on Wednesday. It's tracking towards the Tampa Bay area less than 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene, a Category 4, tore across Florida and other states, killing more than 200 people. A verdict is expected tomorrow in the German trial of a suspect in the Madeleine McCann disappearance case. Christian B, as he is known under German privacy laws, is accused of sexual offences unrelated to the McCann case. He's not been charged with Madeleine's disappearance and denies any involvement. The European Space Agency's Hera spacecraft has blasted off from Florida's Cape Canaveral for part 2 of a planetary defence test. It's on a mission to observe a space rock that NASA hit with a probe in 2022 to change its course. It was never a threat, but scientists want to know if they can deflect space rocks away from Earth if needed. A battle between the Premier League and its most successful current club would appear to have ended in a draw tonight. Manchester City said earlier they'd won a legal fight over commercial rules, which had blocked 2 large sponsorship deals. The league, though, said most of Manchester City's claims had been rejected. And our sports correspondent Rob Harris is at Premier League headquarters for us tonight. And Rob, it's a complicated one, this story. What's it all about and what does it mean for the club and the league?
Well, it's a tribunal ruling that threw into terms things like unfair, anti-competitive and indeed unlawful. And based on Manchester City's interpretation, it is hugely embarrassing for the Premier League and throws into disarray their enforcement of the financial regulations for the last few years. But the Premier League here believe that they can make quick changes to these rules to comply, and that will come at a meeting next week of the clubs. And this tribunal did agree that the profit and sustainability rules are necessary to keep the league financially sustainable and attempt to prevent a distortion of the competition, because even a club with the wealth of Manchester City, backed by Abu Dhabi, cannot spend what it wants on players. It has to raise that income and from sponsors, and it has to be legitimately earned. But it's about how these companies are related to their ownership that is so central to this case. And these deals can't be at inflated values. But the tribunal did find it was unfair for the league to block deals with Etihad Airlines last year, and they were slow making a decision on that, and City might have missed out on millions. And this is all about trying to blow the whole system apart, really, from City. And it's even led to things like shareholder loans that are interest-free now potentially being counted towards the losses that clubs can make, and they're allowed to under these Premier League rules. And it's all part of a bigger showdown, because currently City are contesting a case known as the 115 charges about alleged deception of financial rules that ultimately could see City deducted many points that sees them thrown out of the Premier League. It is very complex, and tonight there is no clear result in this match. Both the Premier League and City are claiming victory.
Thank you, Rob. It's a draw then, I guess. That was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the director of the Onward think tank, Sebastian Payne. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Eye, its headline: PM refuses to rule out UK military involvement if Israel attacks Iran. We'll be right back with that story and others. Do stay with us.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and director of the Onward think tank, Sebastian Payne. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, starting with the Eye, which says the PM is refusing to rule out UK military involvement if Israel attacks Iran. The Metro leads on what it calls Britain's pothole crisis, which the paper says has caused 480,000 incidents so far this year. On the front of the Telegraph, a legal loophole reportedly allows an Albanian criminal to remain in the UK. In other news, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, faces questions about his relationship with multi-millionaire Labour donor Lord Ali. That's on the front of the Mail. The Times reports that Whitehall chiefs are warning of so-called systemic issues in Downing Street following Starmer's sacking of Chief of Staff Sue Gray. The Mirror's front carries an accusation from disgraced TV star Philip Schofield against his former This Morning co-presenter Holly Willoughby. Their headline, "You Brought Me Down." And The Sun has the very same story. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and director of the Onward think tank, Sebastian Payne. Welcome to both of you. Let's start with the Times, and we're going to go inside pages 26 and 27. And this, I mean, mainly the photos are quite striking. People marking the one-year anniversary of the attacks by Hamas, or the October the 7th attacks by Hamas at the Nova Music Festival. Very striking first-hand accounts of one survivor, Ben Yakov, who was there with his girlfriend. They abandoned their car, had to make a run for it under gunfire from Hamas, eventually got home and then signed up for the Israeli military straight away.
Yes, and I mean, obviously, the stories that we've been hearing today and images like this, the kind of palpable anguish of those remembering what they went through, what their loved ones went through, a year ago. The thing about anniversaries is it is a chance to look back, and yet this is a situation where we're not really in a position to look back. We're still in the middle of all of this. There were the attacks on October the 7th, which are so terrible, but during which so many hostages were taken, and those hostages have still not returned home, even though that's supposedly a stated aim and objective of Israel's mission in Gaza. And so whilst there is so much pain remembering what happened, there is so much active pain in terms of what is still happening. And you have to kind of ask what has been achieved over the course of a year on all sides. I mean, what on earth did Hamas seek to achieve in launching this horrific attack? Perhaps it was to bring the region onto the brink of war, in which case that is what has happened, except it's Israel on the offensive, not Israel's enemies. And, you know, there's no let-up today. We're hearing today that there were rocket attacks from Hezbollah, that Israel was firing on all sides, and that Hamas was launching attacks today as well. And given that, I mean, I was watching Benjamin Netanyahu's address where he was saying, you know, we have not been defeated, and he's right, Israel has not been defeated, but Israel has also not won at all, because the stated objectives of obliterating Hamas and bringing the hostages home, neither of those two things have been achieved. So this is, you know, tragedy upon tragedy, and so it is set to continue for the near future.
And that is the pain for many of those marking that one-year anniversary, that they are still in the midst of the tragedy.
And it's worth remembering some numbers here that, 1,200 people were killed at the awful events of October 7th last year. We've also seen 250 hostages were taken into Gaza, which 100 are still there, and the Israeli government has said they suspect many of them are no longer alive. So this is very much still an active conflict in terms of what happened just on October the 7th before we even get to the horrific events we've seen there. But I think that date, there's been so many backwards and forwards between Gaza and Israel. If you think back to the various intifadas, to Operation Protective Edge in 2014. October the 7th, I think, will last a lot longer in the psyche for many Israelis because it felt the nation was under attack in a way that it hadn't been before. And I think when you read the stories in the Times and on the front page of other papers as well, the fact it was at a music festival involved so many young people, the fact it was completely surprised that it wasn't predicted in any way has, I think, just deeply traumatised the nation in a way which has led to the events we've seen there. And I think if Hamas wanted to prompt a wider regional conflict, then they've probably been successful in that regard because you've seen the Israeli government's operations in Gaza to try and destroy Hamas, which obviously are still ongoing. And I don't know how one will mark the end of that or when that is effective. But then obviously it has spread into Lebanon with the attacks to and from with Hezbollah over recent weeks as well. And as Jenny and I were talking before we came on air, a lot of this is going to play into the US presidential election because so much of Israel's standing in the world and its security rests on the United States. And of course, what happens in the first week of November will play hugely into what goes next. That Donald Trump has been out and about today saying he is the greatest friend Israel has ever had in his language, as you'd expect. But if he does win the US presidential election, in some ways that will embolden Benjamin Netanyahu to continue to push on that basis. If Kamala Harris does, then I think things will continue much as they are now. But I think it's 1 year since October the 7th, and I imagine we'll probably be sitting here in a year's time and not a lot will have moved on.
Sebastian and Jenny, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break at this point coming up. The Times writes that Keir Starmer's decision to sack his chief of staff will not resolve systematic issues. So stay with us for more.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours, and we're going to take it back.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power. Now, freedom! There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes, torrential rain and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued with its ultimatum to the people of Ashkelon, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You are watching the press previews. Still with me, journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and director of the Onward think tank, Sebastian Payne. Let's take a look now at the... we're going to have a look at the Times front page. And this story is suggesting that there's a real crisis within Number 10. And Sir Keir Starmer's decision to sack his chief of staff will not resolve the systemic issues within Number 10, nor questions over his leadership. It goes much further than just the sacking of Sue Gray.
Yes, well, I think you should get Sebastian's take on this first, but with his Whitehall hat on, because he was able to say, we were talking about this before, that this comes from some briefing. He can break down what's behind the scenes.
Take it away, Sebastian.
Exactly. Well, having been Whitehall editor of the Financial Times for 4 years, you get to know where these things come from. What's so interesting about this Times story is the language used here. So if you look at this story, it is Whitehall chiefs talk about this. This is not government insiders, nor is it Labour Party insiders. And for the Times to give this story such prominence with such a kind of alarming headline, I mean, that's the last headline Keir Starmer would want to see, suggests that it does come from very senior levels within the civil service, not necessarily the government. And if I was to speculate even further, one wonders if there is a revenge of Sue Gray going on here, because if you look at some of the quotes in this story, they are saying that some of the male advisors around Sir Keir Starmer felt threatened by that, and saying that, you know, that frankly, Starmer, there's a particular quote here, you simply can't have a lot of out-of-control special advisors ousting a chief of staff. The dysfunction in Downing Street is not the fault of Sue. There are systemic issues which Starmer has not addressed. Just because she's gone does not mean things are going to improve. In some ways, the door leads to your road and everything lies with the Prime Minister. So even though Sue Gray has left the building, it is not entirely clear how this row is going to resolve itself. And I think to sort of pull back the camera lens for a moment, a lot of this does come back to the general election, that it was very clear the country rejected the Conservatives, they wanted change, but Labour didn't necessarily define a lot of what that change was, and a lot of voters felt they wanted something else. And I think what you're seeing is that the government is now trying to define what that change is, with a Prime Minister who doesn't exactly know what it is himself. And some people were commenting today, if you think of Tony Blair's first 100 days, he did so much in that first period, made the Bank of England independent, pressed on with independence, started to abolish the House of Lords, introduced the national minimum wage. What have we seen from Keir Starmer? Winter fuel payments for older people,
well, yes.
Resolving some disputes by bunging a load of money at public sector workers, and that's about it. And no sign of a budget as well. So I think there does need to be this grip. But the question now is, Sue Gray is gone. All the focus is on Morgan McSweeney, his long-time campaign chief, and can he get a grip of the situation?
But you're right about its allies briefing for Sue Gray, disputing claims that she presided over a culture of dysfunction within Number 10. So certainly she has those supporters that are still speaking up for her.
There is a kind of bitterness that reeks out of the copy here on the front of the Times. I mean, the question is, why did he pick Sue Gray, who was a civil servant, to have this political job? And, you know, there are rumours that she was responsible for the grid, for the order in which things would be announced. The problem this government has, there was so much goodwill given to this government. We almost gave them a blank check. Just do something else, do something different. It's all yours, take it away. And they have no narrative. They have no narrative other than winter fuel payments and Lord Alley and expensive glasses. And all of that has sort of filled the vacuum. So this is a complete failure of their own making. And I think the country cannot take any more disappointment in politicians. We've been so disillusioned over the past 14 years, more maybe, since the expenses scandal about politicians. And the idea of somebody whose entire platform was change, having nothing to offer, and then there being briefing, counter-briefing, backbiting, infighting, all of this, it is going to damage our politics irreparably on all sides if we cannot have faith in politicians. So I would say Keir Starmer has messed this up. The fact that this story is still continuing is testament to that. And the fact that, you've got civil servants briefing in such a bitter, rancorous way, it does not bode well for the future.
Sebastian, very quickly, just about 20 seconds. What about this line that Sir Keir Starmer has a problem with women in positions of power?
Well, there's been this accusation for quite a while that there's a kind of bro culture around Leader of the Opposition and a lot of male advisers who like to put their strident opinions across. And when Sue Gray came into Keir Starmer's inner circle, she was seen as an ally of Angela.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.